All it needs for evil to flourish is for people of goodwill to do nothing. That is a quote by the late Edmund Burke, a political theorist of the 18th century, and is also the motto coined by Whistleblowers Australia, an association that helps support individuals exposed to corruption and malpractice. Recently, a woman who blew the whistle on drug use involving a group of Townsville soldiers has suffered alleged harassment and threats after her details were released by the Defence Force to her perpetrators. She's been forced to move houses 3 times since the leak and has been allegedly harassed and stalked at her home and at the local supermarket. She claims the soldiers were importing steroids from the US to Afghanistan and smuggling them back to Australia in hidden compartments on trucks. The Australian Defence Force launched an investigation into the alleged drug use by the soldiers, but the woman's cover was blown after a defence investigator leaked her details to the accused soldiers. Professor A.J. Brown, a political academic from Griffith University, has done a lot of research about whistleblowing and the issues surrounding. He wrote the book Whistleblowing in the Australian Public Sector, Enhancing the Theory and Practice of Internal Witness Management in Public Sector Organisations, and also served as the director of the Integrity and Corruption Research Program for the Key Centre for Ethics, Law, Justice and Governance. Professor Brown has said that his research has led him to believe that current legislature to protect whistleblowers in Australia is insufficient and needs to be improved if Australia wants to encourage people to come forward.
Well, I think this is a perfect example of the type of problem that leads to the type of strengthening that needs to happen, because we know that the Defence Forces and the Department of Defence do have quite detailed systems for internal investigations of wrongdoing and dealing with issues like this. Clearly they broke down in this situation from what's been reported in the media, and these are good examples why there needs to be a stronger legislative framework, which means that the standards and the procedures that are used by all federal government departments in particular, including the Defence Force, are strengthened so that the risk of this type of breakdown is reduced. But also in a situation like this, a whistleblower who is left sort of subject to a lot of stress, a lot of pressure, a lot of impacts on their career and their life, should really be entitled to a clear path for quite serious compensation for what's happened that's gone wrong. And these are things that are all lacking at the moment, especially at a federal government level.
Currently, there is no national overarching legislature that protects Australians who expose corruption in their working or everyday environment. 4 years ago, the federal government promised to provide Australia with an all-encompassing Whistleblower Protection Act, but nothing has been developed so far. Professor Brown believes that this example illustrates the need for national protection laws.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, really it's entirely, for whistleblowing within the Defence Forces, for example, currently the whole framework is entirely up to the sort of, almost like the goodwill of the Defence Forces and the Defence Department, rather than having any legislative framework. At the moment, there is a passing reference to whistleblowing and the need to protect them for Australian public service agencies in the Australian Public Service Act, but that doesn't extend to the Defence Forces. So this is a huge issue right at the moment, because the federal government has committed to introduce whistleblower protection legislation, but we've been waiting now for about 4 years for the detail of what it plans to do, if in fact it intends to deliver on that at all. So this is a very clear demonstration of why that type of legislative action is needed.
Professor Brown said that this is particularly pertinent as incidents of corruption are on the increase as global communities become more competitive with one another.
But many of those risks are growing rather than receding internationally because of the incredibly competitive world in which we live globally. So really, Australia's challenge is to stay ahead of the game and try and continually improve integrity and accountability, but it's just a struggle even to stay ahead of the game and make sure that issues like whistleblower protection, like making sure that we have the right anti-corruption institutions or the police to investigate serious criminal conduct, for example, overseas by Australian companies or Australian government agencies that are involved in foreign bribery. There are a whole range of things that really mean that we need to take care and take action, and whistleblower protection is just one very strong element of that.
He also made some suggestions as to how we may improve our protection for future whistleblowers.
So really it's a question of strengthening the requirements on all organisations to have good systems and procedures that they're actually implementing for protecting the identity of people who blow the whistle, for managing them properly, for dealing with the risks of reprisals or detriment. And then if it does go wrong, and or if there are situations where it's basically unavoidable that there are going to be adverse impacts on a whistleblower's career, then the real question becomes compensation so that they can get on with a change of career and the change in their life that's been brought about by the whole issue. So those are things that are realistically achievable, that governments are committed to, that this government is committed to, and so they're things that can be put into legislation and into the regulatory frameworks that will get a better result for whistleblowers like this at the end of the day, hopefully by preventing the handling of their cases from going wrong, but if it does go wrong, by at least making sure they can easily get reasonable compensation.
Professor Brown believes that a national whistleblower reform will enhance levels of justice in the Australian and global community as people begin to feel more safe about coming forward.
Yeah, well, our research indicates that having stronger whistleblower protection systems does have a positive influence on encouraging people to come forward. But the main thing that encourages people to speak up about wrongdoing is if they believe that anybody will do anything about the wrongdoing itself, and that's the crucial thing. So what's really important is that the systems actually deliver on the promise of protection, and that they do deliver on effective action in response to wrongdoing that's alleged or suspected. So we do have good reason to believe that these types of reforms do have a positive effect, but they clearly increase the responsibility on government generally and on the leadership of organisations to actually do the right thing and to deliver in terms of both action on concerns that are raised and in terms of protecting the people who are involved. So it really does put the pressure back on the leadership of organisations and on the political leaders in government to actually do the right thing.